So in that report, Kaylin mentioned how the GOP may see Rubio as being alluring to Latino voters. So just exactly how do Latino voters feel about this senator? Let's find out. Community organizer Ron Gochez is here. He is actually in our LA studio to tell us. Thank you for being here. So my first question to you is, do you think that Marco Rubio could appeal to Latino voters?
I think he can appeal for a very small group in Miami, Florida, but to the masses of the Latino community in the United States, absolutely not. The guy really needs to take a history class and needs to know the realities of our communities, because he definitely does not speak for us.
Interesting. You mentioned in Florida him appealing to Latinos. He won 57% of the Latino vote in Florida. Why do you think that this wouldn't apply looking more broadly at the country?
Well, I think it's known that, Florida and Miami in particular, it's a small group of Cuban Americans who have a really reactionary political line that goes contrary to the rest of the country. You have people who are extremely Republican, who, of course, have, sabotage and even pretty much thrown their own people under the bus in Cuba in order to, have some kind of political power in Miami. And I think that the majority of the people in the United States simply will not stand for that, not only because of the issues of immigration, but the majority of Latino communities against the war. There's issues of the economy, things that he simply stands completely against our own community. And I think that it really speaks to the nature of the system and the profound crisis that it's in, when the system itself has to use either black or Latino people to speak for them to really rescue themselves from the crisis that we know is only getting deeper every day. So it's something that we know he doesn't speak for us, and it's something that I know he will not get the support of the masses of the Latino community, because he has the support of people like the Tea Party, who are obviously completely against our interest.
So you're saying that the key crisis and the key interest here is dealing with immigration, because one thing that in his ads that actually Karl Rove is behind, Bush strategist, is appealing to Obama's failure to address unemployment, for example.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not something that I'm trying to say that the Latino community should advocate for President Obama. Absolutely not. He's failed us just as much as the Republican Party has. But, if you're asking me if the Latinos are going to vote for this guy Rubio simply because of his name, I'm going to tell you that absolutely not. Because we know that his name may be Spanish, he might speak Spanish, but he really speaks for white power. And it's a system it's a racist system that historically, profited off our backs. And he's trying to erase history, saying that, whether we came here on slave ships or whether we were here because of other reasons, he's trying to erase history and now say that we're all American. And we know that that's not true. And the conditions that our community faces and the attacks that we're facing from the police, from immigration, from all these different laws are simply puts us in a very different situation. So he enjoys his own privilege as a Cuban American in Miami. But at the national level, he is not respected, or even, I would say, recognized by the majority of the Latino community.
Talk about that. Talk about what you just said, his privileges as a Cuban American in Miami. Because from what I understand, Latinos do not identify with Cubans because of immigration, because Cubans are treated very differently by the U.S. immigration system than all other Latino immigrants virtually. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, our brothers and sisters from Cuba, some in Miami have a very extreme right-wing agenda that is very different from the majority of our community. Now, there's Cubans, brothers and sisters who may agree with us, but the ones that favor these types of anti-Cuba, anti-Fidel policies really have a lot to gain from this type of Marco Rubio, vice presidential candidate. They have a lot to gain because that gives them power, that gives them a pedestal to speak against revolutionary Cuba, which is something that the majority of the Latino community, I would say, is not in favor of. They're not in favor of speaking against Cuba. So he simply does not represent the interests not only of Latinos, but of working class people in general. That speaks for African Americans, whites, anyone who is poor in this country and needs a job, needs health care. He does not speak for us. He speaks for an elite group of, and I would say, maybe white Cuban community who really does not represent Cuba as a whole or Latinos here in the United States at all.
And so they don't identify with them. The way it was explained to me was that the perception is that when a Cuban comes to this country, they're on a path to citizenship. When Mexicans come to this country, they're on a path to deportation. Is that the perception in the Latino community?
That is a perception. I don't think there's antagonisms against our Cuban brothers and sisters because of that. We know it's not necessarily their fault. It's the government system, it's the laws, it's the immigration laws that really pit us against each other. So this is not against the Cuban Americans. This is against a small group of people in Miami who are dictating politics based on this extremely reactionary policy against Cuba. You know, these people are, most of the people in our community, we call them gusanos, which means that they're not even part of our community. This is something that stands totally against us. They support everything Bush is doing. They support all the imperialist wars. They don't support immigration reform. They are completely, they couldn't be any more different than the majority of the Latino community.
So not representative of the community or the people that you see as the Latino community at all. I want to thank you so much for coming on our show and talking about this. It's really interesting, and we'll have to see what happens and if Rubio does take off. But thank you, Ron Gochez. He's a community organizer from our Los Angeles studio.